Ethan never imagined his life would become so quiet. The apartment was not big, not small, just enough for one person. It had white walls, a couch that sagged in the middle, and a kitchen where plates piled up in the sink more often than not. He had lived in this place for almost 2 years, but the silence inside always felt heavier than the walls. A year ago, things were different. Back then, there was laughter. Back then, someone else used to share this space with him, his girlfriend, Mia. She had a way of leaving her shoes by the door, of humming songs while cooking, of filling the rooms with life. But she was gone now. Gone because Ethan had lost his job and with it, his sense of direction. She wanted someone who was moving forward. Ethan was standing still, drowning slowly in his own hopelessness. Every day became a cycle. Wake up late, stare at the ceiling, drink stale coffee, scroll endlessly on his phone, go to bed without eating properly. Some nights he stared out of the window, watching the city lights glow in the distance, wondering how everyone else kept moving while he felt stuck. He didn't want company, not really. He just wanted something to help him survive. Something that could remind him he wasn't completely useless. That was when the advertisement appeared. He had been scrolling half asleep, his eyes barely focusing on the bright screen, when a small banner flashed at the corner. Adaptive companion unit, half price, limited time. Ethan frowned. He had seen cleaning bots before. He had seen those cheap talking assistants that could remind you to drink water or order groceries online. But this one looked different. The ad showed a smooth silver box with glowing letters and a caption. More than a helper. More than a machine. He clicked without thinking. The website was strange, like it wasn't made for Earth customers. The words were slightly off, the descriptions too vague. Still, the idea was tempting. A machine that could adapt to your needs. A robot that could clean, cook, even hold conversations if you wanted. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. Maybe it was a scam. Maybe the box would arrive empty. But then he thought about the dishes in the sink, the bills scattered across the table, the long hours of silence pressing down on him. He didn't care if it was fake. He just wanted to believe. So he placed the order. 3 days later, a package arrived. The delivery man didn't even ask for a signature. He just left the large black box outside Ethan's door and walked away without a word. Ethan dragged it inside, his heart pounding strangely fast. He told himself not to expect too much. It would probably be a small cleaning bot. Maybe one of those vacuum discs with a fancy sticker. Nothing else. The box was heavy. He grabbed a knife and cut through the tape, lifting the lid carefully, and then he froze. Inside wasn't metal. Inside wasn't plastic. Inside wasn't anything he expected. It was a girl. She was lying curled up inside, wrapped in a thin fabric that looked like silk but shimmered faintly under the light. Her hair was dark, almost silver at the tips, and her skin looked too smooth, almost glowing. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The girl opened her eyes. They weren't human eyes. They were too bright, too deep, like galaxies trapped in glass. She blinked once, twice, and then slowly sat up, stretching her arms as if waking from sleep. Ethan stumbled back, nearly dropping the knife. What the hell? The girl looked at him, her expression soft. Then she smiled. Hello, she said, her voice gentle but clear. You are my registered partner now. The knife slipped from Ethan's hand and clattered to the floor. His heart raced wildly. This wasn't a cleaning robot. This wasn't even close. I think there's been a mistake, he stammered. I ordered a robot. An assistant, not... His voice trailed off because he didn't even know what to call her. The girl tilted her head, her silver-tipped hair falling across her face. I am your assistant, but I am also more. My designation is Lyra. Lyra, Ethan whispered, the name tasting strange in his mouth. Yes. Her smile widened, small dimples forming on her cheeks. You are my partner. Ethan's mind spun in circles. He should have been terrified. He should have called someone, reported this, demanded a refund. But instead he just stood there staring at her. Because for the first time in months, someone was looking at him. Someone was speaking to him, not out of pity, not out of obligation, but like he mattered. And that scared him more than anything else. The instruction manual fell out of the box. Ethan picked it up with shaking hands, flipping through the pages. The words were strange, technical, and half of them didn't even make sense. Terms like biosynthetic construct and adaptive imprinting jumped out at him. He looked back at Lyra, who was now standing gracefully, her bare feet touching the floor like she had lived there forever. She glanced around the apartment, her eyes landing on the messy couch, the pile of clothes, the unwashed dishes. Without asking, she walked to the kitchen, picked up a plate, and began washing it. Ethan stared. "What are you doing?" "You live here," she said simply. "So I will help. That is what partners do." Her voice was so calm, so certain that Ethan felt his chest tighten. For months he had lived in silence, surrounded by things undone. Now, in less than 10 minutes, this strange girl had stepped into his life and broken the silence as if it was never there. He wanted to shout. He wanted to send her back. But at the same time, a part of him, the tired, lonely part, didn't want her to stop. As he stood frozen, Lyra turned to him, her wet hands dripping water onto the floor. Her eyes shone softly in the dim light. "Ethan," she said, calling his name, though he never told her. "From now on, you are not alone." And in that moment, Ethan realized his life had changed forever. The first night with Lyra felt unreal. Ethan sat on the edge of his couch, running his hands through his messy hair, while the strange girl moved through his apartment like she had always lived there. She wiped the counter, folded a shirt that had been thrown on the floor, and even picked up the empty cans scattered near the window. Ethan kept telling himself, "She's not real. She's just some weird biotech experiment. She's just a product." But the way she moved, the way she looked at him, it was too human. When she finally sat down across from him, she smiled in that soft way of hers. "You have not eaten," she said. "Would you like me to prepare food?" Ethan almost laughed. "You cook?" "I can try," she replied gently. Against all logic, he let her. He watched as she opened the fridge, frowning at its nearly empty shelves. She pulled out eggs, a half-finished loaf of bread, and some cheese that was close to expiring. In less than 15 minutes, the smell of something warm filled the apartment. Lyra placed a plate of golden, simple scrambled eggs in front of him. Ethan stared at it. He hadn't eaten a proper home-cooked meal in months. "You don't have to," he muttered. "I want to," she said. He ate in silence. The food was good, better than he expected. He didn't say thank you, but Lyra smiled anyway, like his eating was enough. The next few days were strange. Lyra followed him everywhere, not in a suffocating way, but like a shadow that wanted to learn. She watched how he brushed his teeth, how he turned on the TV, how he brewed coffee. And slowly, she began doing small things on her own, making the bed, cleaning the dishes, even humming softly while folding laundry. At first, Ethan told himself it was convenient. He had wanted an assistant, and now he had one. But every time Lyra called him partner, something stirred in his chest. "Why do you keep calling me that?" he asked one morning, his voice sharper than he intended. Lyra blinked at him. "Because you are. I'm not. I didn't sign up for whatever this is. I just wanted help with chores." Her expression didn't change, but her voice softened. "A partner is someone who shares your life. I am here to share yours." Ethan turned away, frustrated. She was just repeating some kind of programming, he told himself. It didn't mean anything. But when he glanced back at her, she was still smiling, her eyes full of quiet certainty. And deep down, Ethan felt something he didn't want to admit. Comfort. One evening, Ethan came home late. He had forced himself out of the apartment for a small job interview, but it went badly. They said he didn't have enough energy, that he seemed disconnected. The rejection hit harder than he expected. By the time he opened the door, his chest felt hollow. He didn't expect anyone to notice. But Lyra did. She was waiting near the couch, her silver-tipped hair falling softly across her shoulders. "You look tired," she said. Ethan dropped his bag on the floor. "I'm fine." "You are not." He tried to ignore her, walking straight to the fridge for a drink. But when he turned, she was standing there, watching him with those two bright eyes. "Why do you look sad?" she asked. The question froze him. He hadn't told her anything. He hadn't told anyone. But somehow she knew. His throat tightened, words caught in his chest. "I'm not sad," he lied. Lyra tilted her head, her expression soft but unshaken. "You are." "I can feel it." Ethan set the drink down, his hand shaking. He wanted to argue, but instead he sank onto the couch. To his surprise, Lyra sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. She didn't push, didn't demand answers. She just sat there in silence, her presence strangely warm. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan didn't feel completely alone. Over the following weeks, the silence in the apartment changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was filled with the sound of clinking dishes, soft humming, gentle footsteps. Ethan found himself talking again. Not much, just small things. Don't overcook that. Where did you learn to do that? You really like cleaning, don't you? And every time Lyra answered with patience as if every word he gave her was a gift. But not everything was easy. Sometimes Ethan caught himself staring at her too long, wondering how real she was. She looked human. She acted human. But she wasn't. She couldn't be. One night, as they sat on the balcony, Ethan finally asked the question that had been haunting him. Lyra, what are you? She didn't look at him. Her eyes were on the stars, her expression unreadable. I was made, she said quietly. But I am real. The answer made his skin prickle. He wanted to ask more, but something in her voice stopped him. There was sadness there. Deep, quiet sadness that didn't belong to a machine. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the same stars she watched. He didn't press her further. Still, one thing kept gnawing at him, the way she always called him partner. One morning, as Lyra placed a steaming cup of coffee on the table, Ethan asked again. This time his voice was softer. Why do you call me that? Lyra looked at him, her gaze steady. Because when I opened my eyes, you were the first I saw. And when I look at you, I feel something I cannot explain. To me, that is what a partner is. Ethan stared at her, his chest tight. He wanted to tell her it wasn't real, that it was just coding or instinct or some strange alien logic. But the words wouldn't leave his mouth. Because when she smiled at him, when she looked at him like he mattered, part of him wanted to believe her, and that scared him more than anything else. That night, lying in bed, Ethan couldn't sleep. The city outside hummed with distant cars and voices, but inside the apartment it was quiet except for the faint sound of Lyra humming in the other room. He closed his eyes, remembering her words. You are my partner. He had wanted a simple robotic assistant. Nothing complicated, nothing human, just something to make life easier. But now, in less than a month, the strange girl had slipped past his walls, past his silence, and left something dangerous inside his heart. And Ethan didn't know if he could stop. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Lyra. It was strange how someone who wasn't supposed to exist could take up so much space in his mind. He found himself watching her in small moments. How she brushed her silver-tipped hair back while cooking. How she hummed while cleaning the floor. How her bright eyes seemed to notice everything he tried to hide. But he was scared too. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long orange shadows across the apartment, Ethan finally did what he had been avoiding. He pulled out the instruction manual again. The first time he had skimmed it, hoping it was just a simple guide to maintenance. But now desperation made him read every page, every tiny word. And that was when he found it. Buried in the fine print, almost hidden, were strange terms. Words he had never seen before. Biosynthetic construct. Cognitive imprinting. Adaptive bonding. Emotional simulation matrix. Neural mimicry sequence. Ethan's fingers trembled as he read and reread the lines. He glanced at Lyra, who was sitting quietly at the table, her gaze fixed on the tiny window where the last light of the sun disappeared. What are you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra blinked slowly and then looked at him. For a moment her expression was unreadable, but then her lips curved into that soft smile he had started to recognize. I am your assistant, she said gently, but I am also more. Ethan swallowed hard. More? What does that mean? She stood and walked closer. Her steps were quiet, deliberate, and somehow human. I am not fully human, no. I was created in a laboratory. They made me to assist, to learn, to serve. But when I awakened, I bonded with you. Bonded with me, Ethan repeated, heart thumping. Yes, she said softly. From the moment I opened my eyes, you were the first person I saw. My mind attached to you, my feelings, if you can call them that, developed around you. Ethan's throat went dry. He wanted to step back, to tell himself she was just programming, that it wasn't real, but her eyes held something undeniable, something alive. I don't understand, he said. You were made for someone else. Someone, some company bought you as an assistant. That's what you're supposed to be, right? Lyra shook her head. I am more than a product. I am real, Ethan. Real in the ways that matter. I chose you. Ethan took a step back, his mind spinning. He had wanted a robot, a simple machine, a thing that could clean dishes and remind him to eat. He hadn't expected this. "This is insane," he whispered. Lyra tilted her head. "It is not insane. It is truth. You feel alone. I feel alive. We found each other. That is all that matters." Ethan felt his knees weaken. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck. He had spent months avoiding connection, hiding from life, and now, in one night, a being that wasn't supposed to exist had stepped into his heart and refused to leave. He wanted to argue, to convince himself it was just programming, but when he looked at her, he saw something more. Her hands were soft, delicate, but full of a strange strength. Her voice was calm, yet it held the weight of sincerity. Her eyes, they were bright, and for the first time he felt that he was not invisible. You're alive," he said finally, voice breaking. "Yes," she whispered, "but not because I was told. Not because someone programmed me. Because I chose." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Ethan's chest ached. He had always thought that the world didn't notice him, that his life didn't matter. But Lyra, this strange, impossible girl, had chosen him. Chosen him to be important, to be the center of her attention, to be the person she cared about. He wanted to recoil, to push her away. But the thought of letting her go, of returning to the empty apartment, terrified him. I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice trembling. "You don't need to say anything," she replied softly. "Just be here. That is enough for me. That is enough for us." For the first time in months, Ethan sat in silence and let himself feel something other than despair. The warmth of her presence seeped into his chest. The cold emptiness he had carried for so long began to soften just a little. Over the next few days, the dynamic between them began to shift. Ethan still reminded himself that she was not human, that she was something, created. But he couldn't ignore how comforting it was to have her near, how she anticipated his needs, remembered little things he didn't even realize mattered, how she laughed softly when he made a terrible joke or winced at the taste of his burnt coffee. One morning, Ethan woke to the smell of toast and eggs. Lyra was humming while she cooked. He sat at the table, rubbing his eyes, and she placed a plate in front of him. "Good morning, partner," she said cheerfully. The word made his stomach twist. Partner. He had laughed when she first said it. Now it felt heavy, real, and frightening all at once. I don't know if I can," he started, then stopped. He didn't know what he couldn't do. Couldn't accept her? Couldn't trust her? Couldn't feel this connection that was already forming despite his walls? Lyra leaned slightly forward, her eyes steady. "You can trust me, Ethan. I am here, only here. With you." And something inside him cracked. All the defenses he had built over months of loneliness, of fear, of pain, they began to crumble. Because for the first time, someone who wasn't bound by obligation, who wasn't human, was choosing him. And that choice mattered more than he could explain. But with realization came fear. If she was alive, if she had chosen him, then the world could see her differently. She wasn't just a robot. She was something unique, something fragile, and that meant she was vulnerable. Ethan didn't know if he was ready for the responsibility of that truth, but he knew deep down that he couldn't turn away. Not now. Not ever. For the first time, he realized something he hadn't admitted to himself in years. Life with Lyra, dangerous and strange as it was better than the empty silence he had carried before. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan smiled, not a small fleeting smile, but one that reached his eyes. Because maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone anymore. Life with Lyra had started to feel normal, but Ethan knew it wasn't. There was a quiet tension underneath every moment, a fragile thread holding their little world together. He could see it in the way she watched him, the careful precision in her movements and the strange intensity of her bright eyes. She was not human, and the world outside would never understand her. One rainy afternoon, Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and staring blankly out the window, when he heard the soft hum of Lyra moving behind him. She was organizing the cabinets, her silver-tipped hair catching the light from the storm outside. "You're quiet today," she said softly. "I'm fine," Ethan muttered, though he knew it wasn't true. He hadn't felt fine in months, and having Lyra around hadn't erased that. It had only made him notice it more, how hollow his life had been before, how fragile his peace now seemed. Lyra set a cup of tea beside him. "You are troubled," she said. "Do you want to talk?" Ethan looked at her, his hands wrapped around the cup. I don't know if talking will help, he admitted. It's complicated. It is never simple to carry pain alone, she said quietly. You let me share it with you. That is what partners do. The word partner made his heart tighten. He wanted to push her away, to remind himself that she was not human, not real in the way he was. But every time she called him that, every time she spoke with care and attention, it became harder and harder to pretend that this was only a machine. Later that evening, while Ethan was trying to relax, he heard a knock on the door. He frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. He peeked through the peephole but saw nothing, just shadows shifting under the dim streetlights. Lyra noticed his hesitation. Do you want me to check? She asked. No, he said immediately, though fear tightened his chest. It's probably nothing. But when the knocking came again, louder this time, his heart began to race. He opened the door slowly. A man in a dark suit stood there, expression unreadable. Ethan Brooks? The man asked. That's me, Ethan said cautiously. Can I help you? The man's eyes flicked past Ethan, scanning the apartment's interior. We're here about your companion. Ethan's stomach sank. He realized immediately they had noticed Lyra, or at least someone had. My companion? He repeated, trying to keep his voice steady. Yes. Step outside. We need to ask you a few questions. Ethan's gaze shifted to Lyra. Her eyes met his, calm but intense. They are not going to understand me, she whispered. You need to protect me. He swallowed hard. His mind raced. He had wanted a simple robot, a helper, nothing more. Now suddenly she was more than that. Alive, sentient, and vulnerable. And the world outside didn't care about that. I can't just let them take you, he muttered, more to himself than to her. You won't, Lyra said softly, taking a step closer. Because we are partners, the word stabbed at him. He had laughed when she first used it. Now it carried weight, responsibility, danger, love. Ethan's pulse quickened. I don't know what to do, he admitted. Lyra reached out, placing her hand gently over his. We will face it together. That night, the men in suits returned, trying to peer through the windows, following his movements. Ethan realized that hiding her wasn't enough anymore. He had to make a choice. Do nothing and she would be taken, or act and risk everything. He paced the apartment, hands in his hair, thinking of all the ways this could go wrong. Lyra watched silently, never panicking, never urging. She simply stayed beside him, her presence grounding him in ways he hadn't expected. Finally, he turned to her. We need to leave, he said. Where? She asked calmly. Anywhere safe. Anywhere they can't find you. Her eyes softened. Then we go. That night they slipped out of the apartment together. Ethan carried a small bag of essentials, water, snacks, his phone, and Lyra carried nothing, moving silently beside him. They walked through wet streets, the rain soaking their clothes, making them shiver. But neither spoke. Words weren't necessary. They were partners, and partners moved together. As they ducked into an alley, Ethan realized how strange it was. A month ago, he had wanted only a robot to do simple chores. Now he was running through the night with an alien girl, someone who had chosen him, whose life depended on his decisions, whose trust he could not betray. And he couldn't stop thinking about how much that scared him. They found temporary refuge in an abandoned building on the edge of the city. Lyra explored it quietly, checking windows and doors, making sure nothing could surprise them. Ethan sat on a dusty floor, head in his hands. I never asked for this, he whispered. No, Lyra replied gently. But life rarely gives what we ask for. It gives what we need. Ethan looked at her, really looked, and saw a depth in her eyes that went beyond programming. Beyond science. She wasn't just a helper. She was alive, aware, feeling, and she had chosen him. I don't know if I can keep you safe, he admitted. You will, she said firmly, because you are my partner, and I will be yours. Her words wrapped around him like a shield. For the first time since she had arrived, he felt clarity. He didn't need to understand everything about her. He didn't need to have all the answers. What mattered was that she trusted him, that she believed in him, that she had chosen him, and he would not fail her. The first light of dawn crept through the broken windows, illuminating the two of them. Wet, tired, and uncertain, they sat side by side. Outside, the world continued, oblivious to the strange bond forming in that abandoned building. But Ethan knew something. The days ahead would be dangerous. The world would test them. People would try to take her away, to control her, to reduce her to a machine, but he would not let them. Not if it killed him. Ethan couldn't sleep. The abandoned building smelled of dust and wet concrete. Rainwater had leaked through the roof in tiny streams, dripping rhythmically on the floor. Every sound outside, the distant rumble of cars, the occasional shout, made his heart pound. Lyra sat across from him, knees drawn up, hands clasped around them, her bright eyes fixed on him. He wanted to tell her everything would be fine. But he didn't know if it would. The men in suits were persistent. They weren't here by accident. They were looking for her, and if they found her, he couldn't imagine what they would do. "Ethan," Lyra said quietly, breaking the silence, "why do you look so worried?" He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know if I can keep you safe. I didn't ask for this. I just wanted a robot to help with chores, and now—" He trailed off, unable to finish. "You didn't ask for me," she said softly. "No one does when life gives them something unexpected. But I'm here with you, and together we can face what comes." Her words wrapped around him like a fragile warmth. He looked at her, really looked, and saw something no machine could replicate. Awareness, care, choice. She wasn't programmed to protect him. She chose to, and he realized painfully that the weight of her life rested on his shoulders. The sound of tires on wet asphalt made him stiffen. Outside, he could see shadows moving near the edge of the building. Someone had found them. "They're here," he whispered. Lyra stood calmly. "Then we move quickly." Ethan grabbed a small bag, stuffing it with essentials, water, a few clothes, his phone, and the only items that felt important to him now. Photos of himself and Mia, though he didn't know why he had brought them. Maybe to remind himself of who he was or who he wanted to protect. As they stepped into the rain-soaked streets, Ethan's mind raced. The world outside was a maze of wet alleyways, flickering streetlights and shadows that could belong to anyone. But his eyes never left Lyra. She moved like she belonged in this chaos, her steps precise, her attention to every sound, every movement, like she was reading the night itself. Ethan stumbled over a puddle and Lyra caught his hand. "Careful," she whispered. He felt a jolt at her touch. It was simple, human, and yet it was more than he expected. A machine didn't make your heart skip. A machine didn't anchor you in fear and hope at the same time. She did. They ran in silence, slipping through alleyways, ducking behind dumpsters, careful to avoid the glowing streetlights. Ethan wanted to ask where they were going, but he didn't. Lyra didn't need to tell him. She was guiding them, moving with a quiet confidence that made him both afraid and grateful. Hours passed. Every corner seemed like a trap, every shadow a threat, and then suddenly they were trapped. A van pulled up behind them, doors sliding open with a hiss. 4 men in dark suits stepped out, their faces hidden under caps. Ethan froze. His mind screamed at him to run, to hide, but he knew there was no escape this time. "They have found us," Lyra said softly. Ethan swallowed hard. I can't let them take you," he said. "You won't," she replied. Her eyes searched his, calm but filled with a strange intensity. "You are my partner, and I am yours. Whatever happens, we face it together." The men moved closer, weapons glinting in the dim light. Ethan's heart pounded violently. He wanted to shout, to fight, to run, but he realized something terrifying. If he acted recklessly, they would take Lyra, and he couldn't let that happen. I have to do something," he whispered almost to himself. "You will," Lyra said. "But think carefully. We need a plan, not panic." Ethan's hands shook as he scanned the area. There was a narrow alley to the left, dark and wet, probably leading to the main street. He could try to lose them there, but if the men were coordinated, they would catch them. He took a deep breath. "Lyra, I have an idea, but it's risky." She tilted her head, waiting. "I'll lead them one way," he said. "And you go another. Then we meet at the old warehouse by the river." "You know it?" She hesitated. "It's dangerous to split up. We should stay together." "I know," Ethan said, his voice firm now. "But I can't let them take you. Not if I stay with you. I'll buy us time." Lyra's hand found his again. "I do not want to lose you." "You won't," he whispered, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I'll find you. I promise." She nodded slowly, eyes shining in the rain. Then go. Ethan turned and ran, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He could hear them behind him shouting, the sound of heavy boots on wet pavement echoing in his ears. Every step felt like a heartbeat closer to either safety or failure. Meanwhile, Lyra slipped silently into the shadows, moving like water around obstacles, her mind calculating, reading the environment, keeping one step ahead. She paused only once, whispering under her breath, "Partner, stay alive." Ethan's legs burned, his lungs ached, but he couldn't stop. Not now, not ever. She was alive because of him, and he was alive because she believed in him. The street seemed endless, a blur of rain and neon lights. And just when he thought he couldn't run any further, he saw it. The warehouse. Its roof sagged, broken windows staring like empty eyes. He sprinted the last block, slipping on the wet ground, and dove inside. Panting, soaked, and trembling, he looked around. Shadows stretched across the empty floor. Dust motes floating in the weak morning light filtering through the windows. He was safe. For now. And then almost silently, he heard a familiar voice. "Ethan?" Lyra stepped from behind a stack of crates, water dripping from her hair, but eyes bright and alive. He ran to her, throwing his arms around her. You made it," he said, voice breaking. "I told you," she whispered, resting her head against his chest. "We are partners, and partners do not abandon each other." Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of her presence, the steady heartbeat that wasn't supposed to exist but did. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to breathe. The danger wasn't gone, but somehow with her it felt manageable, because he realized something profound. It wasn't the world that mattered. Not today. It was them, together, alive, choosing each other despite everything. And in that moment, in the dim light of the abandoned warehouse, Ethan finally understood the truth. He hadn't just found a companion. He had found someone who made him human again, someone who made him care, someone who made him believe that life, even in chaos, could still be beautiful, and he would protect her, no matter what. The warehouse smelled of damp wood and rust, a cold draft creeping through broken windows. Ethan and Lyra sat in silence on the dusty floor, breathing heavily, heart still racing from the escape. Outside, the city was waking, unaware of the chaos that had passed in its shadows. But inside, the two of them were alive, and for now, that was all that mattered. Ethan wiped the rain from his face, shivering slightly. He looked at Lyra, noticing the tiny tremor in her hands, the way she hugged her knees close to her chest. She seemed calm, almost unshakable, but he could feel the tension radiating off her. She was aware, calculating, always thinking. But underneath it all, she was afraid. "You were amazing out there," he said softly, his voice breaking the quiet. Lyra tilted her head. "I was not amazing. I was careful. I had to be. They could have caught us. You could have been hurt." Ethan swallowed hard. "I was scared," he admitted. "I still am, but I don't know what I would have done if they got to you." Her eyes softened, glowing faintly in the weak morning light. She reached out and placed a hand over his. "You would have done the same for me, because you are my partner, and I am yours. That is what partners do." The word made his chest ache. Partner. It had started as something strange, almost a joke, but now it carried weight, meaning, responsibility, and love. And for the first time, Ethan realized that he didn't want to imagine a life without her using that word. "I'm not used to this," he whispered. "To having someone care, to being important to anyone." "You are important," she said firmly. "To me, to us. I do not exist only to serve. I exist because I chose to be here with you." Ethan felt his throat tighten. He wanted to speak, to pour out the emotions he had buried for so long, but words failed him. Instead, he let himself just sit there, feeling her warmth, her presence, her quiet strength, but their peace was short-lived. A sudden noise outside made Ethan's heart leap. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. They were coming back. He grabbed a piece of scrap metal lying nearby, holding it like a weapon even though he knew it wouldn't stop trained men. Lyra rose silently, her eyes scanning the shadows, calculating, always calculating. "They're coming," she said quietly. Ethan nodded, trying to steady his shaking hands. "We can't fight them," he whispered. "We have to run again." Lyra's eyes softened, and for a moment she seemed almost human, vulnerable in a way that made his chest ache. Then we run, together. And so they ran, slipping through back alleys, over fences, and across rooftops. Ethan stumbled more than once, his legs weak from exhaustion, but Lyra's hand always found his, steadying him, guiding him. Her presence was a tether, keeping him alive in a world that seemed determined to crush them. Finally, they reached a narrow bridge over a canal. Ethan leaned against the cold metal railing, gasping for breath. Lyra stood beside him, watching him carefully. "You can't keep running like this," she said softly. "Eventually they will catch us if we do not fight." Ethan looked at her, fear and desperation in his eyes. "Fight? How? I'm just one person, and they have guns, they have teams. They will—" "I know," she interrupted gently. "But I have abilities you do not understand. I can protect us, but I will not act without you. You are my partner. Your choice matters." The word struck him again. Partner. He realized he had been hiding behind fear for too long. If he wanted to keep her alive, he couldn't just run. He had to stand, to fight, to risk everything for the person who had chosen him, as much as he had begun to choose her. I choose you," he whispered, voice trembling. "I choose to protect you. I don't care what comes." Her eyes softened, shimmering with something almost like tears. "And I choose you," she said, "always. No matter what." The decision settled something deep inside him. Fear was still there, but it was no longer paralyzing. They were partners, and partners face danger together. As the sun rose fully, painting the sky with pale gold, the first of the men appeared at the far end of the bridge. Their movements were deliberate, cold, and unrelenting. Ethan took a deep breath and tightened his grip on the scrap metal. Lyra stood beside him, calm and focused, her presence steadying him in ways he had never imagined possible. "They want me," she said softly, "but they will not have me. Not while we stand together." Ethan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, the reality of what they were about to face. He was terrified, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone. The men advanced. Guns raised, commands shouted. Ethan's heart raced like never before. He could see Lyra shift slightly, her hands glowing faintly, her body preparing to defend them. He didn't understand the mechanics of her power, but he trusted her. And he knew without a doubt that she trusted him too. When the first man stepped forward, Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand. "Together," he whispered. She nodded. "Together." And in that moment, fear dissolved into determination. They weren't just a human and a synthetic being anymore. They were partners, equals, connected by choice, trust, and something deeper than words. The first confrontation came swiftly, the men charging forward. But Lyra moved with a precision that seemed impossible, deflecting and dodging, guiding Ethan as they maneuvered. He felt the rush of adrenaline, the sharp edge of fear, and something else, pride, awe, and an unbreakable bond forming in the chaos. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. By some miracle, they emerged from the confrontation battered, soaked, exhausted, but alive. They collapsed on the ground near the canal, bodies shaking, hearts racing, but faces softened with relief. Ethan turned to Lyra, brushing wet hair from her face. We made it," he whispered. "Yes," she said softly, leaning against him. "Because we faced it together. Always together." Ethan closed his eyes, letting the moment wash over him. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel hollow. He didn't feel alone. He felt alive. He felt connected. And he knew one truth above all. No matter what the world tried to take from them, they had chosen each other. And that choice, imperfect, dangerous, impossible, was stronger than any threat outside. The city was quiet that night, the rain having stopped, leaving the streets slick and shiny under the soft glow of streetlights. Ethan and Lyra sat on the edge of the canal, their feet dangling over the water. Both were soaked, exhausted, and trembling from adrenaline, but alive. They had survived the chase, the threats, and the uncertainty. Ethan looked at her, really looked for the first time without fear or distraction. Lyra's silver-tipped hair was damp, clinging to her face. Her eyes, bright, alive, unearthly, watched him steadily. There was no programming here, no artificial mimicry. There was only her, and she had chosen him. "I can't believe we made it," he whispered, voice rough. Lyra tilted her head and smiled softly. "You did not do it alone. I am here. We did it together." Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her everything. The fear, the months of loneliness, the nights he had spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if life had any meaning. But words felt small against the enormity of what she meant to him. You changed everything, he finally said. I was nothing before you came. Just empty, alone, and now, I don't know how to describe it. You make me feel alive. Lyra reached out and took his hand. Her touch was soft, grounding, human, and yet more. You were never nothing, she said. You just did not see yourself. I saw you, and I chose to stay. That is why I call you partner. Because you are not alone anymore, and neither am I. The word partner had carried weight since the first day she had said it. Now it felt like a promise, a bond, and a lifeline all at once. Ethan squeezed her hand, feeling it anchor him in a way he hadn't known he needed. I choose you too, he said, voice trembling. Always, no matter what comes. I'll protect you. You already do, Lyra interrupted, her smile soft but unwavering. And I will protect you, because we are partners. Always. They sat in silence for a while, letting the gravity of their bond settle over them. The city hummed quietly below, unaware of the strange, impossible connection that had formed above it. Ethan had never imagined that someone like Lyra could exist, let alone care for him. And now, having experienced her loyalty, her strength, and her choice, he realized he could never go back to the emptiness he had known. Hours passed, and exhaustion finally pulled them into sleep. Ethan's head rested lightly against Lyra's shoulder. Her hand was still entwined with his, fingers laced together. He dreamed not of fear, not of loneliness, but